Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the distinction between modularity and interactivity. I already talked about this a little bit, but we're going to talk about it in more depth here. And of course, there's going to be a big lecture on this. But one of the big debates in cognitive science is to what extent is the mind modular versus interactive? So this debate is essentially saying, do cognitive functions stem from functionally independent and specialized modules, or do functions emerge from the interactions among a network of interconnected units? The idea behind modularity is that the mind is composed of separate and specialized processes or components, and the important thing is that they're thought to be informationally encapsulated. So if one component is involved in processing the semantics of a sentence, such as the dog barked at the mailman, there might be one module that retrieves the semantic concept as well as the relations in that sentence. So, it would retrieve what is a dog, what is a mailman, what is barking, that kind of thing. But the important thing is that in a modular mind, the semantics of the sentence would be retrieved without any input from other modules. So there's no sharing of information. So if there's another module, let's say for processing the syntax of the sentence, and the syntax is basically, well, is like assigning words to different grammatical categories. So I say the dog is the subject, the verb is barked, and at the mailman, that's a prepositional phrase, which also includes the object of the sentence, right? So that's what we mean by syntax. It's the structure of the sentence. And so if there's a semantic module and a syntax module, then the idea would be that the semantics of the sentence would be processed without any input or help from the syntax module, and vice versa. So if we were to use picture naming task as an example, in this case, you might say that there's a separate process or component in the mind that only processes the semantic information associated with a picture, and then maybe a separate component for selecting the associated word, and then a separate component for selecting or processing the phonemes or sounds that constitute that word. So if I saw a picture of a dog, right, I would first retrieve the semantic concept of dog. Then there'd be a separate process that would retrieve the lexical word dog, and then a separate component for selecting the sounds that constitute the word dog. So duh, ah, and g. Importantly, though, if this were modular, it would assume that none of these modules communicate or help out each other in any way. They just kind of do their own little thing. So yeah, each module is responsible for its own product, and only once it's finished would it relay that output. So this is kind of a ChatGPT rendering of modularity versus interactivity, at least based on the prompts that I gave it. I think it's pretty good. And of course, it's not to be meant to be taken literally, right? There's not literally little people in the mind, but the people are meant to represent processes or units, and it's only for so it's for illustrative purposes. And here in this picture, you can see there's a bunch of people in cubicles, and they're all kind of doing their own thing. So if each one of these people is processing some aspect of a stimulus in the environment, that would be modularity. And notice how they're not talking to each other. They're just doing their own thing. And once they finish their task, then they might send that information over to a central processing unit. In contrast, interactivity is a bit easier to understand, I think. It's the opposite of modularity. And um, the idea over here is that, even though each of these people might be special, there might be some specialization. Some of these people, each one of these people might be specialized in some extent. The point is that they're all helping each other out in sharing information. And again, not again, but this, no one's really responsible for one thing, but they're all sort of collaboratively interacting with each other in order to produce some sort of product or output. And that would be an interactive cognitive system. And so the idea with interactivity is that every one of these people, right, or components, um, is involved with a fair number of tasks. It's not like one thing they're doing. So interactivity means that the components are highly interconnected and communicate or influence each other. So different components would collaborate in producing complex behavior. Okay, and then in the next video, we'll talk about another debate, which is to what extent are cognitive processes serial versus parallel?